Happy 2026.
It seems like so long ago. We're talking about
I
New
know,
Year.
right?
We're here.
Yeah. And this is our first live stream of 2026. So we're coming out strong.
Yeah. I mean, we promised, quote unquote. We were teasing it a little bit, but we're shooting to do more live streams in 2026, which as
I
long as
think
we get
so
the
too.
engagement.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before, and we're going to try to do our live stream at least the first Friday of the month, around 3:15 Pacific, and then we're gonna try to do every Friday. We both travel quite a bit, so it might be a little harder for us to get 100% live streak, but that's our New Year's resolution.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So the resolution is live stream every week, and it's okay.
Yeah, and we've started this Friday, so we did it.
Yes, we're on track.
We're 1 for 1. We're 100%
One.
for
Yes.
2026.
Yes. 100.
Did you make any New Year's resolutions this year?
I typically don't, but I think in general, these timeline milestones are a good time to just take a minute and just reflect a little bit,
Yeah.
right? So, we talk a lot about continuous improvement, whether that's like a rolling out of an app or just in your personal life, and setting one big goal each year. It just
Yeah.
feels a little off. So instead, I like to try and think about what I did the past year. Was I content with what I was doing, and then where I want to direct it? So sort of just taking a snapshot of how things are going, and then if
Yeah.
things aren't quite going the way I expected, try and just redirect. To answer the question, I haven't done it yet, but that's what I try and do. How about yourself?
Yeah, I don't.
Mm,
I agree with what you were saying. I think I'm a big believer in continual feedback, and so this idea that you make a once a year goal to do a big and big thing, it just they don't work. The data
mm,
is really clear on that, and I think they don't work because you're trying to do a big thing, you're trying to start something new, and the way to do that is not to have a big goal. The way to
yeah,
do that is to identify the goal, but then break down some type of a milestone to like get started. So like if our goal is to hit live stream every Friday in 2026, goal number one is let's start for the first Friday in January and do it, right? It's going to the gym is the one that, I think
yeah,
everybody relates to. Part of it's just discipline and consistency. And if you don't have discipline and consistency, you're not going to do anything. But yeah, if you're trying to lose 10 pounds or 20 pounds or 30 pounds or whatever, like start with 1 pound in a month and then try
yep,
to go to two. And I think the healthy maximum is usually recommended like 5 to 10, depending upon your health and wellness, not medical advice.
yeah. I'm not a doctor. Yeah, there's a lot. There are a lot of strategies for behavior change. Behavior change is
Yeah.
a huge topic in social psychology, whether it's for the individual or for a society, right? But yeah, lots of tactics, building
Yeah.
habits. Temptation bundling is one I know of, and yeah, there are lots of ways to do it. But don't try and set these large, grandiose things, even though they sound good on paper. Actual change happens when you're slowly towards the thing, milestones. But like, don't make
Yeah,
that the
and
yeah
it's vision
all
versus
or
execution, right? You gotta have a
mm,
good vision, you gotta be bought in, and then you also have to get the work done and then not get off track. So if your goal is to lose 10 pounds or whatever, and then you start coding a video game, two priorities that are conflicting. Yeah. And
yeah.
I mean, that's
I
the
mean,
other thing too, is like less goals are better. I know people who have like 20
interesting.
goals,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, that's not obtainable. Like going back to like product management, I generally like 3 OKRs is kind of like my
Mm,
maximum, depending on what we're doing, like maybe 4, just because you can't keep that all in your head at the same time. And like if you have a bunch of stuff you want to do, I think it's okay to like list that all out, but you can only focus on like one thing at a time realistically, maybe 2 or 3, depending upon, if it's like, I want to take out the trash tonight and go to the gym, you can do those 2 things. You can take the trash out on the way to the gym. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
because not all goals are equal, not all our things are equal, but it's so easy to get sidetracked.
Yeah, for those who aren't in the product manager space, OKR is objective key results, which is like I believe it's a Google framework, which has been widely
Intel,
adopted. Is it Intel? Oh
yeah.
shoot! Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay.
David
Um,
Dorr worked at Intel and he created it. Google made it famous. Every
I see.
company that
Now they think, yeah,
don't.
yeah. Now they think that's become part of the startup culture. Is yeah, you got to do that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
if you
cool.
don't read the book, Measure What Matters, fantastic book. Don't make it more complicated than it needs to be, and I think that's the thing with the OKRs for me that makes it successful is like you just don't overcomplicate it,
Yeah.
which is easier said than done. But
Yeah,
most
yeah, yeah.
people,
Speaking of overcomplicating, you shared a story about a company that was building stuff in space, right? So if you imagine that as like your goal is let's start building a manufacturing facility in space. How do you go about doing that and then setting the right goals? And I did honestly, I didn't read the full article, so why don't you go ahead?
that's pretty much it, right? I always do this. I read things and then I don't.
Yeah, the Space Forge, I believe it was called. They had
Uh,
set this idea, or their vision was to start building manufacturing facilities in space because space is the new frontier, apparently. And it's an interesting idea. It's the concept of logistics in general is difficult. We still haven't quite solved a lot of logistics problems here on Earth, but when we're
yeah,
talking about in space, it's like how do you start getting things up there? If you wanted to say build a civilization somewhere else outside of Earth, you start to need to build stuff because it's way too expensive to build things here,
yeah,
and we don't have the capacity to start shooting some things in space that we would need out there to build some human civilization essentials. So I believe the article said something like they successfully launched something in space.
yep.
And once you find that,
Yeah,
please
it was
confirm what
it
I
was
was
like
saying.
fabbing. Yeah, I think it
Yeah,
was around chips. So I put the article in the chat for
yeah.
folks. I think my takeaway was not necessarily that the company did it. Like we are so far from this being reality,
Mhm.
but I think it highlighted this the value of this. A lot of people are like, "Why? It's hard enough to make stuff on Earth.
Yeah,
Why shoot it into
yeah,
space?"
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
some stuff that it's actually easier to make in space. It's more expensive and it's harder, but it's easier. And so they were talking about chip fabrication, and because our technology is making things at the atomic level, getting atoms to play nicely in gravity is a lot harder than it is to not have them play nice in gravity, or so the theory goes. And so
Mm,
if you're in space, you have less gravity, you are able to do the alignments better, which means you get higher precision. You can probably develop new technologies that we can't literally do on Earth, or you unlock higher yields. So the ability for to run more chips on a wafer. We don't need to get into all that probably, but I for me, I really started to think about like what is all this shit that we could potentially make that we can't even fathom today because we're limited by the ability of us to fabricate on Earth.
mhm.
And it's ridiculously expensive to do this. It's kind of a pie in the sky idea, but I think like I started to really think about like that's amazing. And like,
Mhm.
yeah, if we're gonna go to Mars and be interplanetary species and all this nonsense, yeah, we're gonna have to figure out how to build shit in space. But we had, James on the podcast mid last year, and we were talking about growing plans for space and how by trying to even
Ah,
do the
right.
thing, you learn so much that can be applied to like modern life and modern technology. And you can innovate ways of doing things that you normally wouldn't have conceived of because you didn't have that constraint. And generally things get better. So I thought it was just really cool, and then
Yeah,
the news cycle is so negative. I was like, "This is fun."
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's, like,
No,
unnecessary and blah, 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 but it's people pushing what we can do forward.
yeah, yeah, it's awesome. I'm tying this back to New Year's resolutions and self-improvement. I think that's commonly one of the ideas of self-limiting beliefs are one of the things
Yeah,
that hold a lot of entrepreneurs back is they don't think they can do something, therefore they don't even try, or when they do try, they don't put in the good effort because they believe there's a ceiling. So I think what you're saying here is very interesting. Is we have as a society a self-limiting belief of what we can actually build because we quote unquote are bound by the laws of physics, but those laws of physics change when you're in space and that potential of innovation.
yeah, so I don't know, I keep dreaming, like, they're a long way, and they mentioned that in the article, and I don't know the details about the company, but I think there's a lot of challenges on Earth we still need to really solve before we go piss off to some other planet and screw that
Yeah,
up, but,
right.
we can do walk and chew gum, as they say, at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when I read the article or glanced at the article, the thing it reminded me of was the idea of logistics and building stuff and moving them, transporting them, surprisingly
Yeah,
is still very, very difficult. For example, when COVID hit, uh, our global supply chains were demolished because
yeah,
everyone was doing what they call just-in-time manufacturing and just like building things just to meet the quotas and doing predicted predictions on how much supply you would need and not having that slack, as I would say. Right. So if you can build things fast in the area that you're going to use it, whether it be a physical thing or say like energy, which is stuff that I'm looking at,
yeah,
then you don't have, or you're much more resilient to things like global supply chain shocks. So if you're talking about building something in space rather than building stuff here on Earth and then trying to shoot it off into space, if you build it right where you're going to use it, which would be in space, then it's much quote unquote easier than to kind of transport all the goods that you would need out there. So it reminded me of what I call hyper local manufacturing, which would be
Yeah.
a cool idea, but I don't know that it's perfectly right because you need the right things like raw materials if you're going to do manufacturing. And sometimes you just
It's
need to
like
transport
3D
those.
printing, right? That's
Right,
the
exactly. Yes,
idea.
yeah,
The grand
100%.
goal is right. A lot of it's plastics, but metal 3D printing is a thing, and
Yep.
carbon fiber-esque processes
Yes.
and
Right. Right.
materials are a
Carbon
thing.
reinforced plastic. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
idea with that, I guess, for folks is that printing like you would like a piece of paper, like back in the day, you put ink on paper and you manufacture a document. With 3D printing, this same idea, you take a spool of plastic wire or metal wire or other types of materials, and you literally print a thing. So if you wanted a cup, you could print a cup from plastic and it would be a cup. And instead of having to like pack the cup with you and bring the cup with you, or maybe you don't know that you need a cup, you can just literally
Printer.
print it. There's drawbacks with everything else, but it's the idea is you could theoretically ship the raw materials and not the product, and shipping manufactured products is expensive because it's harder, more cumbersome, more things are more fragile. If you could just ship somebody a bunch of sand and then get glass, that would be miraculous, right? Because
Mhm.
anybody who's ever tried to ship anything remotely fragile knows that it's like impossible to
Mhm.
like do. It's much more expensive. And all of the systems in place for the shipping of this stuff is also much more cumbersome and expensive as well. So it's a cool idea, and I hope we keep it going. And then I think what's really interesting is a fun play on words is well, I've been using Google's anti-gravity coding environment for a while, so it
Yeah.
fits in the space thing. But I think it's similar idea to manufacturing in space, in that the Google Antigravity is a development environment that lets you use AI assistance for code, but the way they do it in the UI and the presentation layer is so much more different than other stuff, at least I've tried personally. And I find that they've gotten down this like multi-agent, multi-model workflow.
Mhm.
And instead of you sitting there trying to come up with code blocks or functions or whatever pieces of your code, you're really working more as an architect trying to like tell it more what you're trying to do. You're more in the passenger seat in a sense where you're
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
along for the ride. You're still there, you can grab the wheel, you have a brake, all that kind of stuff. But I find that it's really good. And it's
Mhm.
also Gemini. And we've talked through this before.
Yeah.
I think with Gemini, once you figure out how to work with it, it's it's for at least been for me, and from what I've been doing, much better than Claude. And I know Claude's like the gold standard. But again, I think my approach is more, I'm giving it more of the abstract and
Mhm.
working to refine it versus trying to create a specific thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, so Antigravity is an IDE, which is an integrated development environment for a lot of coders, and now I think non-technical people as well. But people
Yeah.
may have heard of Cursor, which was one of the first ones that took off, where it tried to integrate artificial intelligence into the IDE. And the idea behind this was, rather than working in chats, developers would work directly in their IDE, which is where they do all their coding. So it gave the AI a little bit more context into what was being actively looked at. Whereas in chats, you may need to be copying code back and forth, and you may be missing chunks of code that you're not copying in that the chat paradigm would not recognize. So I did get a chance to play around with Antigravity, actually because Andrew was mentioning how interesting it was and how he thought that it was trying to do something cool. So I was like, okay, well, let me play around with it. I do agree that there's something interesting in the way that it's presenting the information. So, like how we're talking about sending things to the right places and then building things
Yeah.
there. That's what anti-gravity is doing, where it's taking a lot of the thought that the AI, quote unquote thought, I should say, that the AI is doing, and it's presenting like an implementation plan or task
Yep.
list, and it shows you in the IDE as opposed to some of the other, like say for instance, Claude Code, which it'll do that, but it's all in like the terminal window, and you as a it's all text, right? So there are some people who prefer a little bit of a nicer UI layer. You can
But
actually
yeah,
like comment on the task list in Antigravity, which you can't quite do in Claude Code.
I hadn't really thought about that, but you're right. It is the AI interface is
Yeah,
better
yeah,
than other platforms I've used. And maybe that's why I like it too, because I'm like, I like want stuff to work. I'm always tinkering on stuff and I'm totally fine if things have rough edges. But when I'm trying to really get stuff done, you gravitate towards things that are just easy and intuitive. And I guess it's really
exactly.
easy and
Yeah, yeah,
intuitive. And like I've said, like Gemini for me has been fantastic for taking large swaths of work and really getting it roughed out and then refining versus
yeah.
having to like bottoms up something.
Yeah, exactly. So I like indie gravity for that reason. I think there's still a little bit of work to do.
Oh yeah.
Personally, I've used Claude Code for ages, so I much prefer working with Claude Code and the way that it manages contexts. I think indie
Yeah.
gravity still has a little bit of work to do on like breaking out how it does the context. Like I can't quite specifically point out a specific thing in the task list after it's done it. Whereas with Claude Code, you can sort of
Yeah.
rewind in some sense and say, hey, back at this step, what did this do? Or why did you do this? Whereas with anti-gravity, it's sort of like one shot. And I'm like, wait, let me go back. And it has a hard time trying to understand what I wanted it to do in the first place. So that might
Yeah.
just be me trying to work with Gemini a bit better. But yeah, I think you're right. Gemini or anti-gravity, I should say, is actually onto something. I think it's an
Yep.
interesting presentation to how you work with AI. I haven't
Yeah.
used Cursor in a while, so I don't know if there's anything there, but yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't really reinvent, like,
Mhm.
they tacked on so if you're familiar with VS Code, it's a
Yeah.
I think it's actually the
Fork.
same
It's
thing.
a
Yeah,
fork.
it's a
Yeah, it's a
fork.
fork. Yeah.
But their work they've done has been to put in all of the AI stuff in a nice little sidebar, and then all of the tooling required to let the agent go and run too. And I think that was kind of a cool thing for me was that I started a project, gave it like permissions to the directory and said, go forth and do shit. And
Mhm.
it did. Whereas other tools I've used are a little bit more cumbersome. You have to fight plugins or config files and all that kind of stuff. And it just worked. And it wasn't a local project either, which is what I also really liked about it. It was like
Mhm.
effortless. I didn't have to go install a bunch of packages on the server to get stuff done either.
Yeah.
I would keep an eye on it, and Google, like, everything does a really shitty job of carrying their own products.
Too much to PR. They can't be PRing everything. Like
Yeah.
honestly they do have a lot of cool stuff that I feel personally doesn't get enough spotlight. But yeah. For those who are actually like super technical or more technical, I do think anti-gravity is one of the only options you have to use Gemini Pro in a coding environment, like not
Yeah,
using an API key,
good
which I
point.
personally I was looking for this for months. I was trying to figure out how to use my Google AI Pro subscription to use their coding services, but all the coding options use the API, which is more expensive. It is a lower cost, at least for now, whenever in
Yeah. It
January 2026 is cheapest.
it can be more expensive, it also can't be, but the cool
Fair,
thing with
yeah, fair.
that and for technical folks is that's built into the Google Gemini entitlement on your Google license. But it's also great for other people on teams who they're your designers who might be a little bit more technical or want to be more technical or want to try to understand the bridge better or product people who are the same kind of either more technical and want a little bit of an edge or want to close that gap a little bit more. You don't have to set up a bunch of API. You don't have to have engineering. It's just if your organization has Google stuff entitlements, if you're just using it personally, I think it works with Gmail, and then you can get like free tier, and you can like
Mhm.
buy
Yeah, that's
Google's
right. Yeah,
branded.
that's right.
Google, your Gemini stuff's a mess. Please fix it. It's really confusing. I've been complaining about it for a couple years. I think the biggest barrier to using this stuff is still trying to figure out if you have API or if you have the
Yes,
regular, and
exactly.
if you have the
Yeah,
regular, what are my credits, and like is it costing me money? And like I have both.
yep,
Like I have all this like continual paranoia of like, am I gonna get a bill for thousands of dollars because I used the wrong thing and didn't realize I
yeah,
was doing it. But other than that, no, it's I again, I guess disclaimer, my company is, Google for Startup sponsoree. I don't even know what
supported, and
yeah,
yeah,
supported.
supported. Yeah,
Not an ad, but it's a great product.
yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. Anything else for the new year? We can maybe cut it a little short today since we're both recovering from New Year.
Yeah, no, we're going in strong, right? First live session, we'll try to keep it up. I think we'll aim to be a little bit more consistent, or at least give a little bit of heads up for those who do want to join live streams and throw questions and or ways of communicating. We're still figuring that out, right? Bear with us.
Yeah, and I think I'll do a better job of getting this stuff out because like today we live streamed like pretty much without notice.
We need to keep.
We'll try to get live by 3:15 on Fridays, and I'll try to put it up the night before, so like 24-hour notice ish, and then we'll go from there. Happy 2026. I'm glad 2025 is dead. I'm hoping it's better. V6 of 2020. It wasn't. Like I don't know. It's a really weird time. And I don't think 2026 is going to be any less weird than 2025.
Given the things that, or the direction of things are headed, I think I agree with you. At least in the US, I should say. Yeah. Given the landscape of things that are happening in the US, yes, I think
where goes the US, so goes the world. So buckle up.
Maybe we'll see if that's going to hold true for the next 3 years, 2 or 3 years. But yeah,
I don't know. I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. I think the US is going to keep pushing the world to wherever the US is going. And I wish we as a country would act a little bit more serious and be more respectful of that privilege. Maybe that's a good way to end it. Happy 2026. See you next time.
You can find us at 38.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C. As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do. We'll see you next time. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/38 or at ko-fi.com/38. Thanks for listening.